Hello everyone, welcome to this exciting project on AI powered SQL query generator. So imagine where you don't have to write a complex SQL queries. Instead, you just type your question in the plain English and AI instantly converts into a fully optimized SQL query. Sounds amazing, right? So well, that's exactly what we are going to build. So in this project, you learn how to use OpenAI's GPT-4 to generate the SQL queries, how to build a fast API backend for the query execution, and even you learn how to create an interactive UI with the Streamlit and how to optimize the SQL queries for the better performance. So let's get started. All right, so the first step is to create a separate folder for this project. So I've created Euron AI powered SQL query generator as a folder name. Okay, now let's try to create an environment. Even for creating an environment, you can use VENV module, or you can go with the Anaconda Conda environments. Okay, so in this project I'm going with the Conda environment. So creating an environment is completely of your choice. Fine, so let me just go to my Anaconda prompt. This is my Anaconda prompt, and I'll just copy the path over here so that I can just get into the VS Code. So I'll do here cd into this. I'll tell here code dot, so that will open the VS Code in the same folder. All right, so I have opened the VS Code in the same folder over here. Now let me just create an environment. So let me go to the terminal here and click on new terminal. I'll open the command prompt. Fine. So right now I'm in the base environment. Okay, to create an environment, the command is conda create hyphen a name, and the name of the environment I'll give as AI SQL underscore env, and the Python version here in this project I'm using 3.10, and to enter. Yes, I want to proceed. So it will take a bit of time. During this process, you can just fast forward the video. Okay. Yeah, so it got created. So now the next step is to activate this particular environment, because right now I'm in the base environment. To get into this environment, so we need to tell conda activate. So conda activate the environment name, that is AI SQL env, and to enter. Yeah, so the environment got activated. Fine. So the next step is to install all the dependencies. Okay, so for that we're going to create requirements.txt file. So let me just go and create a requirements.txt. I'll tell here new file, and I'll tell requirements req uirements requirements.txt. Do enter. Yeah, so now let's try to install all the requirements which is required for my project. So these are the list of environments. I want AI framework, LangChain, Llama Index, Crew AI, ChromaDB. Okay, so all the necessary dependencies and the packages. Fine. So let me just save this, Control S, and install all this requirements in our environment. So I'll tell here pip install -r requirements.txt, and do enter. Okay, so here I'm getting some dependencies issue. Let's try to solve this. All right, so I've just fixed it. So I've just removed all the versions here. Okay, just remove all the versions with the same Python version, whatever the conda we have created. Try to install it. Okay, it's the same thing. I have not changed anything. Just try to remove all these versions. Okay, because if you try to stick to some specific versions, we'll have the compatibilities issues. So already you have tested; it's already working fine. Okay, so you can just find this in the resource section. So it's what the same requirements.txt file you need to add it. All right, so once we're done with the requirements.txt, so next the very important file is the .env file. So here we're gonna set all our environment variables like OpenAI keys, because we need to connect with the databases as well, right? So here we'll be using MySQL. So if you don't have MySQL, you can just go to the MySQL community download. Okay, MySQL um community download. Or you so because in this project we are connecting with the MySQL. In case if you want to connect with some other databases, you need to do the slight changes. Okay, but if you're following along, so make sure you download the MySQL community server. Fine. So let me just open MySQL also here. So I've already downloaded. So let me just go to MySQL. So this is my MySQL workbench, and the password. You can see user is root, and the password is also root. Let me just enter. All right. So this is my MySQL server. Fine. So let me just go back here. All right. So in the .env, so I need to add MySQL host. So I'll tell here MySQL host. So it's a local host. I'll tell here local host. So next I need to enter MySQL username. I'll tell here MySQL username. So these are the environment variables which is required for my further process. Okay. So I'm just creating all those things. This is the root. Username is the root. The next is the MySQL password. MySQL password, and the password is root. The next I need the MySQL database. Okay, MySQL database, MySQL underscore database, and the database is the test DB, and MySQL port is 3306. Okay, so even let me just show that. If you go to my MySQL, so there is test DB, so you can just create your own databases and some tables, okay, for the testing. So this is the my test DB. Can you see here test DB, and here we have some sample tables, okay, committees, members, raw customers, and the users. For the demo purpose, you can just create any of the databases. Fine. All right, so next, apart from this, so even we need OpenAI key. So I'll tell here OpenAI API key, and let me just copy and paste this key, and this key has to be uh, confidential. I mean, like, you should not share this key to anyone. So let me just copy this, and by the time you watch this video, so this key will not be valid. Okay, let me just do Control S. Okay, so this is my entire key over here. Okay, so let me do Control S over here. Fine. Okay. All right, so in the .env, so we have all these important variables, okay, and in the requirements.txt, we have all the dependencies which is required for us to work. So next, apart from this, we need few scripts. Okay, let me create all the scripts. Okay, so first we'll have something called app.py, which will be our entry point. So even let's create a UI also, because we are creating a Streamlit app. Okay, so in the app we can have the FastAPI, and the UI we can have the Streamlit. And apart from that, let me just create a script only with respect to database. I'll tell here database.py, and let's create for the query generator. So I'll tell here query generator. So query generator, GENERA query generator dot py. All right, so we have added all the necessary scripts here. So let's start. Let me just close all these things first. So here, let me close .env, query generator, databases, UI, app, okay, requirements, release notes. Okay, so first let's start with database. Okay, so let's start with the database. All right, so let me just go to my database.py. This is my script. Let me just paste the code. All right, so very simple. Okay, so we are importing all the necessary modules here. We are importing OS, then we are importing create engine and the text, which help us to create a connection to the MySQL databases. Okay, so this is a required one. So next, from .env, we are importing load.env. So what does it do? So it basically loads the environment variables with the .env, because we are trying to make a connection, right? So to have that connection, so we need all these parameters, right? So like host name, username, password, and database, right, and the port. So all this details is being passed from the .env. For that, we are just loading this. So then we are loading the environment variable. This is how we need to write it, load.env. So this loads the .env file, so where the database credentials are stored. So next, so this is my database credentials. So we have MySQL host, user, password, database, and port. So where to get all this information? So I'll be getting this from the environment variables, right? So that is what the dot os dot get env. So this is very helpful because in case if you don't want to hard code this directly in the script, okay, so can directly use this dot env to fetch all the informations. And whenever you're trying to share this scripts in the GitHub, okay, can just add this .env in the ignore file, so that this will not be shared across the public profiles, okay, any public portals. Fine. So and the default port is 3306. Okay, please try to remember this. So now let's create a MySQL connection URL. So this is how the connection URL looks. So we have the MySQL user, then we have MySQL password @ then MySQL host, MySQL port, and MySQL database. Okay, so all these things is being fetched from this particular variables. So now let's create the SQL. So we are establishing a connection with the MySQL database here with help of create engine, and we are passing the database URL which we have just constructed, right? And we are set to echo equal to true. What does this do is it enables the SQL logging to show the SQL commands in the console. Okay, so we need to set this echo equals to 2. So then we have the function. We have two functions. So first to test the connection, it's called test connection. First it will open the database. Okay, so it will open the database, so that it will run the select database to check the active databases. Then it prints the database name if the successful, or otherwise it will throw an exception. Fine. So next we have the get schema. So here it will retrieve all the schema details from the information schema dot columns. So from the information schema dot columns, and then it will finally organize data into some dictionary format. Okay, so we'll have the table 1, then the column data type, then the column 2, okay, then the table 2, okay, all those information, that's what being displaced, and it's a loop, okay, just looping over it. And finally this script is run, okay, with help of this test connection. Okay, so let me just save this, control S. All right, so now let's proceed with query generator. Okay, so then we can go with the app.py as well as the ui.py. So in the query generator, so let me just paste this. So this is where we're going to use all the OpenAI, right, which help us to generate the queries. All right, so here, so we are starting with importing all the necessary modules here, like OS, OpenAI, okay, SQL Pass, regular expression, right? So it's basically regex, okay, so which help us to clean the SQL query responses. So that's where we're going to use this RE. So we have load .env, already have told this. So then we are importing all the necessary modules which help us for the safe execution of the SQL queries, like caching, databases, execution errors. Then we have all the database connections. Okay, so to create a connections. Okay, so same thing, whatever we have just used in the database.py, we are importing all the necessary modules. So then we are loading all the environment variables. Okay, so where we have set. So then we are creating OpenAI. So here in the here we are just loading the environment variables for the OpenAI as well. Okay, this you can see dot get env and OpenAI API key. So here we started with defining all the methods. Okay, so first is the clean SQL output. So it removes all the markdown code block syntax, like we'll have. So once you some sample a query that is being generated, it contains many metadata information. So we're just trying to remove all those markdowns, okay, and just extract the actual SQL queries. Okay, so all the AI elements has been just removed, okay, using the all these expressions. Okay, so here it removes all the markdown block formatting using this regular regex, and here we are extracting only the valued SQL. Okay, so this is what with help of re.search, and this method is basically just used for the cleaning. Okay, next we have the validating the SQL query syntax. Okay, so that's where we're going to use the parse SQL parse. So here we have a SQL parse which basically checks if the query has a valid SQL syntax or not. Okay, so we have just added that if condition. And finally we are generating the SQL query. So here it contains many information. So first it will retrieves the database schema using the get schema from the get schema. So then it generates the prompt instructing the OpenAI to create an optimized SQL query right? So so whatever the query that is being generated, it uses indexing, okay? So even it tries to have some kind of joins, okay? Instead of some nested queries, you will try to generate some optimized query, okay? And if it is any group by or wait clause required, even it uses all those things. So this is what we have just getting that a prompt, okay? This is what the prompt is. Okay, so you can just modify the prompt based on whatever the requirement is. If you want to optimize the specific requirements. So once your this generate query is executed, okay, then finally we have the query optimization. Okay, that's what the suggesting indexes is. So it uses an explain to analyze the how MySQL executes the query. Okay, so because we have the explain section in any of the RDBMS systems. Okay, so where we'll check all the code that is being executed in the most efficient manner, right? So it basically uses that explain. So then finally prints the execution plan, and finally it suggests the some suggest any if you want to add any indexes on the frequently filtered columns. Okay, so this is what is done at the end. So you can see, so here we are just looping over it and consider adding an index on the frequently used where conditions. Okay, and if this, it will just return that in case if there's any exceptions, it will throw an exception. And finally we are just executing that SQL query with help of execute query method. So here we have first we validate the SQL query before execution. So you can see first is checking the validation. So then it will execute the SQL query using the connection whatever we have set, and finally it will fetch the results and check for the potential optimizations. Okay, just an order by whatever we have executed on top, it trying to run everything in just step by step manner. And finally the script is executed here. Okay, so first generate the results. So first what it takes a natural language query from the user, so then it will execute the SQL query and it will retrieve certain results, then it prints the performance improved suggestions as well. Okay, so this is how it works. So if I want to tell like how it works, first it will ask the user to enter the some language, I mean like a basic plain English, like to show me the top 5 selling products. So then AI will convert that into optimized SQL query. Then the SQL query is validated using the SQL pass. Then the SQL query is executed in the MySQL. Then execution results even that are displayed. Then they will have the execution plan that is being checked using the explain. And so if there is any optimized suggestions required, so that is being provided by the indexing. Okay, so this is what the entire flow is. All right. So now, so once this is done, so the next thing is let's go and update our app.py. Okay, so inside the app.py, we're gonna set the fast API thing. So let me just copy here. Yeah, so this is my app.py. So here we are importing all the modules once again. Okay, like from the FastAPI, importing the FastAPI. Then from the Pydantic, we are importing the base model. So this is required for the data validation. Okay, this base model. Then from the query generator, whatever we have written the script, from there we are importing generate SQL. So this is a method which helps us to convert a natural language query to the SQL. Then we have execute query, the last one which I just showed you, right? So which is runs the SQL query and returns the results. Then we are initializing the fast API application. So then we have defined the class here called query results. Here we can see we have something called string input containing the user's natural language query for the SQL natural language. Okay, so or a SQL query you can say. Fine. The next we have defined the all the API routes here. The first API route is slash generate SQL, which takes a natural language query as input. Then it will call generate SQL query to convert into a SQL. Then it will return what? It will return the SQL query if it is successful, or else it will return an error message if it is failed. Fine. So it's what it's happening. So then we have a next route. So here we have execute SQL query route. So once the previous step is done, then it will accept the SQL query as input. Then it will call the execute query to run the queries on the MySQL database because we have that connection. Then it will return what? Query results, optimized suggestions, and the if any of this is failing, then we'll return an error. That's what the execution error is failing. Fine. So then finally we're going to run this. Okay. So let me just save this as well. Okay. Control S, and let me just save this query generator. Then finally we are left with one single script, that is UI. Okay, so we have the Streamlit here just to see all the interaction in the UI format. So that we're going to add here inside the ui.py. Let me just do control S. Okay, so here it's very simple. Okay, we are importing the Streamlit as st, importing the requests, which sends the API request to the FastAPI backend, because we have created a backend, right? So FastAPI. So now we are just setting all the basic page title descriptions. Okay, title is AI powered SQL query generator. Then we take a text input from the user, that we ask the user to enter the natural language query. Then we are generating the SQL query. That's what we are provided by the st dot button, generate SQL. So as soon as the user clicks the generate SQL, so all this process happens. Okay, so it sends the user query to the fast API backend, that is slash generate SQL. Then it will display the generate SQL in the formatted code block. Then we'll return the SQL query in the st dot session state for the execution. Okay, so this is what we are just connecting all the dots here. And finally, we're going to execute the SQL query. So here, if it checks if the SQL query exists in the st.session state, when the execute query button is clicked, then it sends the SQL query to the fast API backend, that is a slash execute SQL. That will display the SQL results, and even it will show some SQL optimization tips as well. Okay, there's the indexing recommendations. Fine. So this is what the entire UI here is. Okay, so let me just save this. So yes, so we are done with writing all the scripts over here. So now let's try to execute the project, and if you're facing any import issues or installation issues, we'll try to solve that. All right, so I've just tested before recording the output. Okay, so everything is working fine. So we need to do one of the installation, that is, even we need something called a SQL sparse. Okay, so we don't have here SQL sparse. So whenever you're doing the installation, so make sure even you add the pip install. So at the end, you need to do pip install SQL sparse. Okay, so if you have any kind of model missing, you can just do pip install. Okay, SQL parse, PARSE. Right. So let me just save this. All right. So once you're done with this, I even have made one mistake. Okay. So while typing it, so that is inside this .env, I have written just my. Okay. I'm not written the SQL. Okay. So make sure you write MySQL underscore host and the local host. Okay. So this is what the missing part was, and the rest everything is working fine. So everything is saved. Okay. Let me just go and run my fast API. So once you execute this, so it got started. Let me just go here. So you need to go to the slash docs. So please don't type only this. Okay, you'll not get it. Okay, so once you go here, just type slash docs. Yeah, and here you'll get post generate SQL and execute SQL. Let me go to generate SQL and click on try it out. And here you can just write your plain English. Okay, so for example, I have connected to my test DB, so there is some sample data. I want to see, like, show me users. There is a users information. I'll tell older than. Show me the users who is older than 30. Okay, let me just click on to this execute. So you should get a response to 200, just to confirm that everything is working fine. So if I just go to my VS Code, so even you can see here, yeah, all the information here. Okay, so you can see this is select query. I'm getting it. So it's absolutely working fine. So now let's test this using the Streamlit. Okay, so it will be very easy for the understanding. So instead of checking the results in the fast API, so I'll just go here. So right now I'm inside this environment. What is this environment name? It's a AI SQL env. Okay, so let me just go to the command prompt, and I'll tell conda activate. So to run the Streamlit app, I need to get into the same environment. Okay, so conda activate, and the environment name. So what is the environment name? So environment name is AI SQL env. AI SQL env. Enter. Okay, AI SQL env. Okay, if I do ls, so I have all this. Okay, dir. So you can see we have all these files. Now let me just run this UI part. So to execute, I'll tell here Streamlit. So make sure you should have running this fast API. Okay, so I'll tell here Streamlit run ui.py. It's stream Streamlit run ui.py. Streamlit run. I'm giving run no stream stream Streamlit. It should work fine. AI SQL env, is it the correct env? I mean AI SQL env. We don't have Streamlit. Streamlit. Okay, so Streamlit is, if it is not there, just try to install it. Okay, that's not a problem. Okay, can just add the missing one. Okay, so SQL sparse, just remove this hash. Okay, because I already have installed it, so I'll remove it. Okay, now let me just run this. Streamlit run ui.py, allow. Okay, so here you can just type it, same thing, like show me users older than 30, generate. Yeah, you can see I'm getting select star from. So execute query. Execute, I'm getting some issue. Let's fix this. Okay, let me just fix this. I'll do control C here just to cancel this out, and let me fix this. Yeah, all right. I have just fixed it. So there was some minute changes in the app.py. So here what we have done is, so inside the slash execute SQL. Okay, so it was not able to fetch the result. Okay, so when I clicked on execute that inside the SQL, in the MySQL, right, so it was not able to fetch it. Okay, so what we had done is we are ensure the we are just extracting the result in the form of JSON. Okay, so that's not a issue. So we're gonna see the results in the JSON. Okay, if I just go back to my results, so I just entered show me all the users older than 30, so it generated the if I click on generate a SQL. This is what the SQL is. Now I'll tell execute this particular SQL. Okay, and this is what the query results I'm getting it. So you can just show this inside your tabular format also. Okay, so you can just do that as an updated version. Okay, so here instead of showing the results inside the JSON, you can just convert that back to a tabular format as well. Okay, so even you can see I'm getting optimization tips. Fine. So before running, so make sure your backend, that is a fast API, is running. Okay, you can see even it got generated the execution plan over here. Okay, and make sure this is running and you can execute all your Streamlit apps. Okay, so if you're not executing the fast API and you're trying to execute only the Streamlit, it will not work. Okay, so make sure you execute this properly. All right, so yes, so this was all about SQL generator. So this project you can just enhance it by adding more functionalities. Okay, so here you'll get a lot of ideas. I mean, like here instead of going with the standard MySQL, if you want me ask the user to connect with any of the databases, whether it's could be Oracle or any other databases, you can just even try to enhance that, right? So here the fix what we have done here is the in the execute SQL, that is we are converting the results from the connection to the dictionaries. Okay, that's it. Okay, so in case you want to convert that back to a table, you can just add one more thing to just to display it. Okay, so yes, so this is all about the project. So I hope you have enjoyed it. So see you soon in the next project. Okay, happy learning. Hello everyone, welcome back. So in this version of the project, we have enhanced the some features. So let me just show you like what are the enhancement we have done, and this enhancement will be carry forwarding like whatever we have done in our previous project in the version 1. So let me just go and run the server over here. So let me just execute this unicorn app, and so my fast API is executing it. Okay, so let me just go here And so instead of showing this, I'll be showing that in the later in the video, like how to check inside the fast API. But let me just directly get into the UI. Okay, so for the UI, let me just run this Streamlit run app Streamlit ui.py. So yes, so this is how the updated version is looking. So we have added extra features. So in the previous version, we had only the query to enter in the plain English, right? But generally, like you can't directly use this application unless you don't know like what are the databases you have, what are the tables, and so what are the different schema structure you have in within your MySQL. To know that, okay, we have added a separate section over here, like for example database section. Okay, so once I click on the list databases, so I'll be getting all the available databases in my SQL. Okay, so for example, I have this classic models, Euron DB, information DB, MyDB, MySQL, Sakila dataset, test DB, right? So now these are the different data bases. So before writing the queries, right, so I can just explore like what are databases I have. Now I want to work with test DB, so let me just enter this test underscore DB over here and do enter. So once you do test underscore DB. Now I'm getting an option to show tables. So let me click on the show tables here. So these are the different tables which is present inside this database. So we have committees, we have members, we have raw customers, we have the users. So now I can just see what are the columns we have within the users, right? So this is my users table. I tell here users, user tab and enter. So show columns. So here I'll be getting know what are the different columns I have, right? So we have ID, name, email, and the age. So based on this, I can frame a question. Okay. So now I can just tell like we have how many users are older than the 30, right? So this is what the query one was we were testing. Let me click on generate query now. So I'll be getting the query here. So this is what the query is. So I can just copy the same query over here and try to enter in the run SQL, and I'm getting the results, right? So yes, this is what the enhancement we have done, because you can't directly write queries unless you don't know what is a tables or databases you're working with, right? So now let's try to implement this. So let's get started. All right, so I have opened the project folder, so in which we were working. So we were working under the Euron AI powered SQL query generator. So let me just open that in the VS Code. So already have opened that in the VS Code. Okay, so this is my uh, all the files within the project. So we had the app.py, databases.py, query generator.py, and the ui.py. So now we need to make a certain changes to add those features. So first let's start with a databases.py. Okay, so before this, okay, so make sure you have added all the necessary environment variables like open API key, the databases name, tables, okay, and all the connection details which have already showed that in the version 1. Okay, so make sure you just add all those inside this .env file. All right, so first is the databases. So instead of just modifying from here, so what I can do here is, so let me just copy and just paste the code. Okay, so whatever the enhancement, so this is what the current file. Okay, we are importing all the necessary libraries here. Okay, so we are loading the environment. Okay, so we had all the connection details here, like texting the connection, getting the schemas, but we are just enhancing this with the other part. Okay, so let me just add those things. So we are implementing of listing all the files and stuff, right? So we're going to update that in the databases.py. And let me just explain like what we are doing in this. Just a second. Yeah. So here we have added a few changes like listing the databases, list tables, list columns, because this is what we have seen in the UI, right? So once you start selecting your list databases, so then you can just select what are the databases you want to work with. Then you're going to see like what are the tables. So then within the tables, what are the different columns you have, so that you can write the query like in the plain English in a better way, right? So here, let me just get into this. Fine. So first, we started with importing the required libraries, right? So we are importing the OS logging, then we are importing the SQL, the connection libraries like create engine, okay, and the text, and we're importing load.env to import the environment variables which is present inside my .env file. So next we are just loading all the environment variables using the load.env, and this is a basic configurations. Okay, even we are setting the logging here. Okay, logging dot basic config, and we are just setting that to the debug. So in case if you have any errors, we can just fix that. So here in the databases credentials, so we are just writing this database URL so that I can just connect to my database. So we are getting all those parameters from the .env file. Okay, for the MySQL host, if I just go to my .env, this is my what .env file is. So so I'm getting all the connection parameters from the .env file. Okay, so os.get env, I'm getting the local host, root, the password, user, password, database, and the port. Okay, and then finally I'm just building this connection string. Right. So then we are even implementing the try and the exception handling generally, right, and along with the logging as well, right? So here we are just setting up the logging, stating that once this connection is successful, just print that in the console, right, in the log. So logging.debug, so connecting to the SQL. So this is what the my host username and the port is. So now it will try to connect to that particular engine, okay, using the databases URL which we have passed over here. And then finally I'll be getting a database connection successful. So in case if you have any kind of exceptions during this particular process, so that will be printed in the output. All right. So next, the functions. So next, yeah, this is the place we are starting with defining the different functions. The first function is to list all the databases, right? So after the connection, so you want to see like what are the different databases is present within your MySQL. So I'm creating a function called list database, and we are just added the try and except block here. So with that connection, that with engine.connect as a connection, so just connection dot execute show databases. Okay, we have wrapped that inside the text. Okay, just to execute that particular query, and we're fetching that all and returning all the databases which is present inside my MySQL. Okay, and that will be displayed. This is what the list databases function will be doing it. So next we have the list tables. So list tables will list all the given tables, list all the tables within the given database. So I need to tell like what are databases I want to work with. Then it will try to use that and list all the tables within that database. So we are just getting started with the list tables, and we are passing a parameter here called database name, right? So then with the same settings, okay, engine dot connect as a connection. So connection dot execute show tables from that database, whatever the parameter we have passed, and fetch all. Then we are just looping over all that particular table just to print the result, right? And if there is any kind of exceptions, that will be displayed. So next we have the list columns. So once we got the databases, once we got all the tables within that database, now it's time to get all the columns so that I can write an effective query, right? So here I'm just creating a function called list columns. Here we have a database name and the table name. That's what we need to pass it. So with the same connection settings, so engine dot connect as a connection. So connection dot execute. So show columns from that particular database and from that table, and we're fetching all those things, and that will be displayed. Okay, so this is what the updated database.py file is. Okay, let me do Control S. All right, so now the next step, let's try to update our app.py. So inside the app.py, so we had so only the slash generate SQL and the slash execute SQL. Okay, so now we have the list as well, right? So to list the databases, to list the tables, as well as list the columns. So let me just go, let me update this. Let me first remove all the existing app.py. So if you want to keep this older version, you can just set up the GitHub as well. Okay, so that will be very helpful. So if you want to go back to the previous version, or you want to do some kind of enhancement, so easily you can just update that. All right, so this is my app.py. So here, so this fast API code, it helps the user to list all the databases, list the tables in a specific database, then they list a column in the table. Then based on that, I can write a SQL a query with the natural language input. So first step is to import all the required libraries. We are importing the Fast API, Then we're importing the logging, which is used for the debugging and the tracking the errors. Then finally, we have the database. This is a custom module which contains all the functions which we have already defined in the database.py. We had the list databases, list tables, and the list columns for the database operations. So then we are importing the query generator. We have not updated, but this query generator includes all the generate SQL query, which converts in natural language to the SQL. And finally, with help of this, we can execute the query. Okay, whatever we have done in the previous version is the same thing, but we have a slight changes to do that. And finally, we have this fast API. We are importing this fast API and the query over here. So next step is to initialize the fast API application. So I'm just initializing that with help of app, creating an object of that, that's a fast API. This will basically initialize a fast API instance which handles the incoming requests. So next we are setting up the logging. So here we are just setting that into a debug mode to capture the detailed information for the debugging. So these are the list of endpoints, okay, starting with slash databases, slash tables, slash columns. Then we have generate SQL and execute SQL. Okay, so this is what already there in my version 1. So what we have added here is these are the three new endpoints we have added. So one is the slash databases, then we have a slash tables and the slash columns. So the first one, so this is what the endpoint is. So we are app.get. Okay, so this is the method. The endpoint is slash databases, and the function call here is the list databases. Okay, so you can see list databases. So this is coming from where? It's coming from the databases.py. Okay, so here we have created list databases. So we are just calling that. Okay, so let me just go here into app.py. So this is what this is my endpoint, the slash databases, and what is the function here? It calls the list databases from the database module. And what is the output? It returns a JSON object containing all the available databases. So once I execute, I'll be showing that output in the fast API. Okay, so it will just list all the objects within that particular in MySQL. Okay, whatever the databases we have, it will list all thing in the JSON object in the JSON format. So next we have next method. The next endpoint is basically slash tables and the database name. Okay, so here the method is also a get because we are getting the information, and so here the method which you're calling is a get tables, but we need to pass a database name over here, right? And so it will return again the JSON object containing all the table names. Okay, it's the same process. And finally, we have the last one, that is a slash columns, which will list all the columns in the given table. The first we are just passing the what is the database and what is the table, and within that table what are the different columns we have. I'm just listing all those things up with help of this endpoint, right? So here also it's an object. Okay, so return is the JSON object containing all the column names. Then finally, we have the endpoint, which we already done in the version 1, that is the slash generate SQL. So we are starting with the debug logging, that's stating that generate the SQL query. Okay, so whatever the natural language we have just passed it. So here the method is post, very important. The method is post, and the endpoint is slash generate SQL. And what is the function? It will call the generate SQL query from the query generator. Okay, so we have not updated, but here we'll try to add one of the method called generate SQL query. Generate SQL query. Okay, so this is what the method is. We're gonna call that. This is what the function is. Okay, and what is the response? It will try to return the generated SQL query. Okay, so which we have already done in the version 1 is almost the same thing. And finally, we have the last endpoint, that is the execute SQL query. So here the method is the post, and the endpoint is slash execute SQL. And here we are calling a function called execute query. So, but here what is the parameter we need to pass? We need to pass a SQL query from the query generator module, right? And so it will return the query execution results in the JSON format, fine? So this is what my updated app.py is. So let me just do the control S over here. So next, let's go and update our query generator. So here we have just slight changes. Okay, so let me just update this one. Let me just do control A and try to delete this everything. The query generator. So we have the two things, okay? So two functions which we need to get it. So but we are just importing all other imports, okay? There's a list databases, list tables, and list column. This is the only new line which you've added, but you can just update it, okay? So you'll find that in resource section. Fine. So first we are just importing all the required libraries over here. We are importing OS, OpenAI, okay, regular expression, okay? So then we are loading the .env, okay, which help us to load the environment variables, okay, so all the connection parameters. And the important line here is from the database module over here, we're importing the engine list databases function. There is a method, and the list tables method, and the list columns method. Okay, so the first step is to load the environment variables. We are just setting the open API key, which is being fetched from the environment variable. Here we are just limiting to avoid the token limit. Okay, we are just limiting the max tables, and the max columns per table is 5 to 5. You can just handle this. Okay, so here I've just listed 5 and 5 because so OpenAI sometimes given restrictions, if you have a number of databases or you're fetching a lot many columns, so sometimes the OpenAI will throw in a limit, okay, error limit. So make sure it just based on your whatever the options you have just chosen for the API, okay. So you can just set those things based on whatever the models even you're choosing it, okay. So here we are just limiting the max tables and the max column per table to 5, okay. So in case if you want to update this, you can just so only the reason here is just to avoid the exceeding token limits over here, right? So yes, so next we have different functions here which help us to clean the AI generated SQL query, because there's a lot of metadata information, a lot of unnecessary formatting, okay, which we'll be getting an output from the OpenAI to remove all those formatting, okay. So first we are just we're cleaning it, okay. So like clean query, then we're gonna do a SQL match over here. It's the same thing whatever you have done in the version 1, okay. So I already have explained that in the version 1. So next function we have something called a fetch a limited database schema. So it basically retrieves a limited database schema to reduce the token consumption. So here we have the schema here, okay. The schema is basically we are creating a dictionary here, okay. So next we have the databases. Finally we're going to append that in the schema, okay. So for the databases, for the DB in the databases, so just try to append all those schemas and get all the tables, okay. So and trying to append that, just loop over the tables and try to append that over the schema here, okay. So and finally it will return the schemas within the test DB. What are the different tables you have within that particular tables? What are the different columns you have, okay. So entire schema is basically fetched using this get limited schema option, okay. You need to handle this very carefully because this is where you'll be getting the limit or token limit issues, okay. Fine. So that's what even you can see the comment here, okay. So the fetches reduce database schema to fit within the OpenAI token limit. So next is the generate SQL query from the natural language. So it's the same method whatever we have implemented in the version 1, okay. I'll just skip this. So next we have the execute query. So once you just write the whatever the query you want to in the plain English, so the query will be displayed. You can just copy that particular query and try to execute that in the execute query section. So that query will be executed and the result will be displayed to you, okay. So this is what the last method we have, the execute queries. So let me just do the control yes over here, okay. So right now we have updated app.py, databases.py, and the query generator py, okay. It's up to date, and even we have the requirements.txt, which is up to date, okay. So whatever the modules we are working with, so we have up to date all those frameworks, and all the packages has been updated. So now the only thing which we need to update is ui.py, okay. So this is our Streamlit. It's a front end, okay. Let me just paste that over here. So because we are adding a different extra section in my streamlit.py, right? So the first is we are importing all the necessary modules, okay. So the title will remain everything. So only thing we are adding is a sidebar, okay. So inside the sidebar you have seen that, right? So here inside the sidebar I'm adding all these features, that is list databases, then show tables, then the show columns, okay. So we are trying to implement that over here. So here just st dots slide sidebar header database selection. So here first we are, as soon as the user clicked onto this list databases, so the request dot will be sent to the API URL, that is the FastAPI at the backend /databases, okay. If this connection settings and all those parameters are well and good, so then the response will be 200. Okay, and I'll be able to see all those databases which is present in my which is present in my SQL, that is in my SQL. Okay, so that will be displayed. And this is what the write is. Okay, st dot sidebar dot write available databases, and all those databases will be listed. So if in case if there is any error, so error fetching the databases will be displayed. So next we have this select database. So in the same sidebar, okay, even we have an option. So once we got to know, okay, what are the databases we have, so now I need to tell like what is the databases you want to work with. So here the first thing which you need to the first thing which you need to and send is like what is the database name. So once the database's name is known, so then you need to enter what are the tables you want to work with. Okay, so it will just try to call that particular endpoint slash databases slash tables and the selected DB. Okay, and the response is correct, so I'll be getting the response status as 200. And so in case of any errors, so those errors will be fetched over here. So next we have the tables. Okay, so now we know like what are the databases, what are the tables. Okay, now we need to see what are the columns which is present inside my tables. Okay, so it's added in the same sidebar section. So show columns. So as you click on show columns, it will hit that particular endpoint with the slash columns slash databases selected and the slash tables. Okay, so it will try to fetch all those columns. If there is no issues, then it will be displayed. Okay, so if errors, it will be displayed as error fetching the columns. And yes, so in the side, I mean like in the center we had this AI powered query generator, so where I'll be entering the query in the plain English, so it will call that necessary endpoints. Okay, and so finally I'll be executing the SQL query based on its generator after copying and pasting into the separate box over which is given below, right? So yes, so this is my entire UI. So now let's verify our fast API first, then we're gonna verify using the ui.py. So first, let me open the two terminals here. Okay, one for the fast API to run and one for the Streamlit. Okay, so here, so make sure you're inside the environment. Okay, so right now I've not activated the environment. So to activate the environment, so we need to just tell venv slash script slash activate. Euron, if I do ls. Is it Conda environment? So here let me need to check. So what I can do is let me just close this project and let's try to open in the Anaconda. I have saved everything. Okay, so what I can do is, so let me just go in here, Anaconda prompt, cd into same folder over here. Let me just go here, AI powered SQL query generator. Not this one, it's a Euron, right? So it's Euron AI powered SQL query generator. Let me just copy this, Control C. So here, let me just go and do CD into this. Okay, so I'm into base environment. Now let me just close this Euron thing. No, I want to save everything over here. UI is also saved. So now I'll tell here code dot. So this is what I got it. So let me just list all the environments. Okay, let me just open the command prompt instead. Sorry, CMD instead of this. Okay, so if I just tell here conda list env. Okay, it's conda env list. It's conda env list. Yeah. So here we have SQL. Where is SQL? Um, AI SQL env. Okay, so this is the AI SQL env. So conda activate AI SQL env. Yeah, so this is the one. So let me just do enter. . All right, so let me just yeah, so my environment is got activated. So let me just open one more command prompt over here, and here let me just tell directly that is conda activate. So conda activate this one, control C, and I'll paste it. All right, so now let me just run the fast API. So everything I've just saved it. So connecting to the MySQL host 3006 was successful and the database connection was successful. So let me just copy the endpoint. So here let me just copy this. Control C, go to your browser, and let me just close this older one. And I'll just tell here. So make sure you just add the slash docs. Okay, so slash docs. Yeah. So these are the all the endpoints we have. The get, three gets. Okay, one is a slash for the slash list databases, list tables and the database name, list column database and the slash tables name. Okay, and two post. Okay, first let's test for the list databases. So click on try out and execute. So you should get 200 response. You can see I'm able to get all the databases over here. Okay, so it's absolutely working fine. So parallelly, even you can just check the output here as well. Okay, can see everything got executed 200. Okay, so let me just go back. Yeah, so next is the list tables get. So I need to enter the database name here to try it out. I'll tell the database name as test underscore db. So make sure you have these databases in the MySQL. If I go to my MySQL, you can see we have this test db. Okay, so here let me go and execute this. Oh yeah, I'm getting a 200 response. Okay, so within that database test db, I have the committees, members, raw customers, and the users. So we have the committees, members, raw customers, and the users. So the next we have the list columns here. Let me click on get. So try it out. So here for the before this, click on try it out and get the database name. It's test db, and the table name. Okay, so what is the table name? So table name, let me just give it as users. So here you can see we have the users. So I'll tell here users and click on execute. Yeah, I'm getting 200 response. So within that we have the id, name, email, and the age. Okay, so similarly you can just click on generate SQL. You need to pass it's a post method. You need to pass that in the general plain English. So I'm just telling because we are connected to, not connected, I mean like I saw like we had the users. I want to see like all the users older than the 30 over here. And so it will basically create a query here. You can see select star from test db.users where the age is 30. Okay, so you can just try with some other databases tables and you can just make it more complicated. Okay, so yes, this is absolutely working fine. Finally you can just click on execute query to execute it. So yes, this is absolutely working. Now let me just go and hit the Streamlit app. Okay, just to show if everything is working fine or not. So let me just go to my VS Code, and here in the new environment. Okay, let me just run my Streamlit UI dot Streamlit run ui.py. Let me execute this. Okay, so I'm getting all the sidebar. You can just close and open that. Fine. So here first is the list databases. So make sure the fast API at the backend it has to be running. Okay, so don't close that. Okay, so list databases. So here we have all these databases. So now go with the enter test DB. So I'll tell here test underscore DB over here. Enter. You need to do the enter and show tables. So you're getting all the tables, and I want to work with the users. I want to know what are the columns we have. So click on show columns. You can see I'm getting all the columns, and here you can write all the, I'm writing the same query. Okay, same query in the English, that is show me all the users in the older than 30. So generate SQL. So now the SQL query will be generated. You can just copy that over here and try to paste it and run the query. So I'm getting all the results here. Okay, so these are the users whose age is greater than 30 over here. fine. So yes, so this was my version 2. So yes, you can just enhance it more by adding the more and more features, okay. And so you can just update the UI part, okay. So right now we are just connected to MySQL. You can just add the other things, okay. If you want to connect with the Oracle or SQL Server or the Postgres, okay, you can just do that enhancements. So yes, so this was the enhancement for the from the version 1. Okay, so I hope you have enjoyed it. So see you soon in the new project.